The disguise of truth. Saturday morning had arrived, and the quiet hum of a suburban plaza began to stir. Terrence Wallace, CEO and founder of one of the most successful retail chains in the country, sat in the driver's seat of his modest sedan, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His face was familiar yet unfamiliar. His usual polished, commanding presence was absent. Today, a plain hoodie, jeans, and a worn baseball cap replaced his tailored suits and polished demeanor. The decision to go undercover in one of his stores was not made lightly. Over the past few months, reports had trickled up the chain, complaints of poor service, unprofessional behavior, and even subtle hints of discrimination. Terrence couldn't ignore them. His stores were supposed to stand as beacons of fairness and inclusion, yet these allegations suggested otherwise. The Dallas store he was about to step into wasn't just any location. It was his first out-of-state branch, the first risk he took to expand his vision. It had thrived in its early days, but over time, as his empire grew, he found himself further removed from the day-to-day operations. If there was a problem, he needed to see it firsthand. Terrence adjusted the strap on his canvas bag, took a deep breath, and stepped out of his car. The sun was bright and unforgiving, casting sharp reflections off parked vehicles. The storefront loomed ahead, its logo bold and proud against the Texas sky. A familiar wave of pride washed over him, but was quickly replaced by resolve. Today wasn't about celebrating success. It was about uncovering the truth. As he stepped inside, the blast of air conditioning greeted him, along with the low hum of activity. Families maneuvered carts down aisles, children darted excitedly between displays, and employees moved with varying degrees of purpose. To the casual observer, everything seemed fine. But Terrence wasn't a casual observer. He paused near a display of small appliances, scanning the floor. A young woman in uniform chatted with a customer, her demeanor warm and professional. Nearby, an employee restocked shelves with mechanical precision, avoiding eye contact with passing shoppers. At the electronics counter, a young man leaned lazily against the counter, engrossed in his phone. Terrence decided to start there. He approached slowly, picking up a pair of headphones from the display and pretending to examine them. He waited for the young man to notice him, to offer help, or at least acknowledge his presence. Seconds turned into minutes. Nothing. Finally, Terrence cleared his throat. The young man glanced up briefly, his expression one of mild annoyance. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone flat and detached. Terrence smiled politely. "Yeah, I was wondering if you could tell me about these headphones. Are they good for outdoor use?" The employee shrugged, barely looking at the box. "I don't know. Probably. Could you check?" Terrence pressed, trying to remain patient. The employee sighed dramatically, took the box, and flipped it over. "Says here they're weatherproof," he mumbled, handing it back without another word. Terrence felt a pang of disappointment but pushed forward. "And compatibility? Are they easy to connect to most devices?" The young man rolled his eyes. "All the details are on the box. You can read it yourself." For a moment, Terrence stood there, stunned. He wasn't sure what was worse, the indifference or the outright dismissiveness. But this wasn't the time to react emotionally. He simply nodded, placed the headphones back on the shelf, and walked away. As he moved to other sections of the store, Terrence began to notice patterns. A middle-aged Latina employee greeted him warmly as he entered the clothing section, offering genuine help and suggestions. He watched as she assisted another customer, her patience and kindness shining through. It was a stark contrast to the electronics employee. In the home goods section, Terrence overheard a conversation that stopped him in his tracks. Two employees stood near the cookware aisle, speaking in hushed tones, but loud enough for him to hear. "Did you see that guy in electronics?" one of them said, nodding subtly in Terrence's direction. "Bet he's just here to look. People like that don't buy anything big." The other employee chuckled. "Yeah, probably waiting for a sale or something." Terrence's jaw tightened. They didn't know who he was, of course. To them, he was just another customer, a black man in a hoodie and jeans. But their words revealed a deeper issue, one that went beyond poor service. It was bias, ingrained and unchecked, poisoning the very culture he had worked so hard to build. At the checkout counter, Terrence found a glimmer of hope. The cashier, Denise, was a middle-aged woman with a warm smile and a kind demeanor. She greeted every customer with genuine interest, her professionalism a breath of fresh air amidst the indifference he had encountered elsewhere. "Did you find everything okay?" she asked as Terrence approached. "Not exactly," he replied, his tone measured. "But I think I'll hold off for now." Denise's smile faltered slightly, but she nodded. "Well, if you need anything, just let us know. We're here to help." Her sincerity reminded him of what his company was supposed to stand for, yet it also highlighted the inconsistency in the store. Why were some employees so dedicated while others seemed indifferent, or worse? Back in his car, Terrence sat in silence, the weight of the day pressing down on him. This wasn't just about one or two bad employees. It was a systemic issue, one that pointed to a breakdown in the culture he had built. Somewhere along the way, the values that had defined his company had been diluted. But as disheartening as the day had been, Terrence knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let this slide. Change was needed, and it started with him. With a deep breath, he started his car and prepared to confront the truth head-on. This was only the beginning. A call to accountability. Terrence Wallace drove away from the store that bore his company's logo, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the suburban plaza. The weight of what he had just experienced bore down on him like a heavy stone. In all his years of running his business, he had never felt so disconnected from its soul. The store had been his pride and joy, but now it felt like a hollow shell of the dream he had once nurtured. His mind raced as he recalled the encounters. The dismissiveness of the electronics associate, the casual bias overheard in the home goods section, and the bright spot of Denise's professionalism. These weren't isolated incidents. They were clues, pieces of a puzzle revealing cracks in the foundation of his company. Terrence pulled into a quiet parking lot near a park. He needed a moment to collect his thoughts before taking the next steps. As he sat in the car, he opened his notebook, a companion he had carried since his early days as an entrepreneur. It was a place where he jotted down ideas, goals, and reflections. Today, it would serve as a roadmap for confronting the growing problem in his company. 1. Identifying the root cause. Terrence scribbled furiously, creating 2 columns, what worked and what didn't work. Under the first, he listed Denise and the Latina employee in the clothing section, who had embodied the values of professionalism and respect. Under the second, he wrote about the indifference of the electronics associate, the biased conversation between employees, and the clear inconsistency in customer service. The pattern was undeniable. The company's culture, once rooted in inclusion and respect, had splintered. This wasn't about one bad apple. It was about an ecosystem that had allowed those apples to thrive. "I delegated too much," Terrence muttered to himself, his pen pausing mid-sentence. "I let others take the reins without making sure they understood what this company truly stands for." He tapped his pen against the notebook, the rhythmic sound blending with the distant hum of traffic. Delegation was necessary as his business grew, but somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of the human element, the people who interacted with customers every day. Values couldn't just be written in a handbook or posted on a wall. They had to be lived and reinforced at every level. 2. Planning the confrontation. Terrence decided it wasn't enough to report what he had seen and heard to the regional manager or HR. This required a personal touch. He needed to go back to the store, not as a disguised customer, but as the CEO, someone ready to confront the issues head-on. But how would he do it without alienating the team? He flicked to a fresh page in his notebook and outlined his approach. Gather the facts. He needed to recount the specific incidents, not in a confrontational way, but as evidence of systemic issues. Acknowledge accountability. This wasn't just about blaming employees or managers. It was about taking ownership of his role in letting these problems fester. Set clear expectations. He had to articulate the values of the company and explain how those values translated into everyday behavior. Create a plan for change. Words alone wouldn't fix the problem. He needed actionable steps to rebuild the culture. Satisfied with his outline, Terrence started his car and drove to a nearby cafe. He ordered a black coffee, found a quiet corner, and began drafting an email to the store's manager, Brian. 3. The email to Brian. Subject: urgent. Store visit follow-up. Dear Brian, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to take a moment to address something important regarding my visit to your store earlier today. First, let me commend the efforts of employees like Denise at the front register and the associate in the clothing section who went out of their way to assist customers with kindness and professionalism. Their dedication is exactly what we aim to represent as a company. However, I must share my concerns about other interactions I observed. During my visit, I experienced and overheard behavior that does not align with our company's core values. Specific incidents included dismissive attitudes from staff and troubling comments that suggested bias. As the leader of this organization, I take full responsibility for ensuring that our values are upheld across all locations. It's clear that there is work to be done, and I would like to meet with you and the team tomorrow afternoon to discuss these matters openly and collaboratively. This is not about placing blame, but about identifying where we've fallen short and how we can move forward together. Please arrange for all staff to gather in the break room at 3:00 p.m. tomorrow. I look forward to working with you to make this store a place where every customer and employee feels valued and respected. Best regards, Terrence Wallace, CEO and founder. 4. The journey back. The next afternoon, Terrence arrived at the store wearing his usual business attire, a crisp navy suit and polished leather shoes. The transformation from his undercover guise to his true identity was stark, and as he stepped into the store, he felt a mixture of nerves and determination. Brian greeted him at the front with a professional smile that didn't quite hide his unease. "Mr. Wallace, it's good to see you again." "Good to see you too, Brian," Terrence replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Let's get started." Brian led him to the break room, where the entire staff had gathered. The atmosphere was thick with apprehension, employees whispering to one another as Terrence entered. The electronics associate who had dismissed him the day before avoided his gaze, while Denise and a few others offered polite smiles. Terrence took a moment to observe the group before speaking. He wanted his words to carry weight, to pierce through defensiveness and resonate deeply. 5. Addressing the team. "Good afternoon," Terrence began, his tone steady but warm. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Terrence Wallace, the founder and CEO of this company. Yesterday, I visited this store as an ordinary customer, not as your boss." The room fell silent, every pair of eyes fixed on him. What I experienced during that visit was eye-opening. Some of you exemplified the values this company was built on: kindness, professionalism, and respect. Others did not. He let the words hang in the air, giving them time to sink in. This isn't about singling anyone out. This is about identifying a larger issue, a culture that has allowed inconsistency and bias to creep in. And that's on me. Somewhere along the way, I became too distant, trusting that the values I set at the beginning would carry forward without constant reinforcement. That was a mistake I won't make again. Terrence paused, gauging the room's reaction. Some employees looked uncomfortable, while others nodded in agreement. "We're going to fix this together," he continued. "It starts with accountability, and it starts now. Tomorrow, we'll begin mandatory training on bias, professionalism, and customer service. This isn't a punishment, it's an opportunity to learn and grow." He turned to Brian. "Leadership starts at the top, so I expect you and every manager to be fully engaged in this process." Brian nodded, his expression resolute. "Absolutely, Mr. Wallace." Finally, Terrence looked at the employees who had shown exceptional professionalism. To those of you who are already living the values of this company, thank you. You are the standard we should all strive for. As the meeting wrapped up, Terrence felt a mix of relief and determination. This was just the first step in a long journey, but it was a necessary one. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but with accountability and a renewed commitment to their values, he believed they could build something even stronger than before. Outside the store, Terrence paused for a moment, watching as customers came and went. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about fixing a store, it was about reclaiming the heart of his company. And he was ready for the fight, the deep dive into the heart of the problem. Terrence Wallace returned to his office the evening after his meeting with the store team, his thoughts a whirlwind of reflection and determination. The day had been emotionally taxing, but he knew the journey was just beginning. A meeting and a promise of training were not enough. He needed to understand the systemic roots of the issues he'd uncovered and take meaningful action to address them. He closed his office door and sank into his leather chair, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a sprawling view of the city. It was a view that once filled him with pride, a symbol of everything he'd built. Tonight, however, it was a reminder of how far he still had to go. With a deep breath, Terrence opened his laptop and began reviewing internal reports, employee surveys, customer feedback forms, and performance evaluations from the Dallas store and others like it. He wasn't just looking for patterns, he was searching for the blind spots in his leadership that had allowed these issues to fester. 1. The hidden cracks in the foundation. As Terrence scrolled through the reports, one troubling trend became clear: inconsistency. Employee feedback. Some employees praised their managers for fostering an inclusive and supportive work environment, while others complained about favoritism, lack of recognition, and even subtle discrimination. Customer complaints. Comments ranged from glowing reviews of exceptional service to scathing accounts of dismissive and unprofessional behavior. Performance metrics. Stores with high customer satisfaction ratings often had managers who were deeply involved in training and team building. Conversely, locations with poor ratings often had managers who delegated without follow-up or were described as distant. Terrence leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The problem wasn't just about individual employees or isolated incidents. It was about the culture that had taken root in certain locations. Somewhere along the way, the values he had built his company on had stopped being universal truths and had become optional guidelines. "This is my fault," he muttered to himself. "I trusted too much without verifying." He jotted down a note: standardization versus personalization. The challenge ahead was to create a consistent culture across all locations while allowing individual teams to infuse their unique energy and community connection into their work. It was a delicate balance, but one he knew was crucial. 2. The call for reinforcement. Terrence decided he needed outside perspective. He called Olivia Martinez, his longtime friend and an expert in organizational culture. Olivia had consulted with companies far larger than his and was known for her ability to cut through the noise and identify the core issues. "Terrence," Olivia said warmly when she answered, "it's been a while." "Too long," he admitted. "Olivia, I need your help. I've got a culture problem in my company, and I can't fix it alone." Over the next hour, Terrence laid out everything he had experienced and observed during his undercover visit. Olivia listened intently, her silence punctuated by the occasional thoughtful hum. When he finished, Olivia didn't sugarcoat her response. "You're dealing with a culture gap, Terrence. What you're describing isn't just about poor training or bad attitudes. It's about a lack of accountability at every level. Your values have become aspirational rather than actionable." Terrence nodded, already knowing she was right. "Where do I start?" "You start by making your values non-negotiable," Olivia replied. "That means redefining them in a way that's clear, measurable, and tied to behavior. Then you build systems to reinforce those values. Training, incentives, performance reviews, and real consequences for falling short. Olivia agreed to help Terrence design a company-wide initiative to rebuild and reinforce the culture. They called it Project Reset, and its mission was simple: to reconnect every employee, from the entry-level associate to the regional managers, with the core values of the company. 3. The data that spoke volumes. The next morning, Terrence and Olivia began analyzing the data in detail. They started with customer complaints, categorizing them by type and frequency. Unsurprisingly, the most common issues were related to customer service, rudeness, inattentiveness, and lack of knowledge about products. Bias and discrimination. Customers of certain demographics consistently reported feeling unwelcome or ignored. Inconsistency. Variability in service quality from one store to another. Next, they turned to employee surveys. The responses painted a picture of a fractured workforce. In locations with strong managers, employees described feeling motivated and valued. In stores like the one Terrence had visited, the feedback was starkly different. Lack of support, unclear expectations, and a sense that their efforts went unnoticed. Your managers are the gatekeepers, Olivia observed. If they don't embody the values, their teams won't either. You need to start there. Terrence nodded, making a mental note to schedule a leadership summit. What about the employees? How do we reach them? You make them stakeholders, Olivia said. If they feel like they're part of the solution, they'll take ownership of the change. 4. Uncovering stories from the ground. To truly understand the employee experience, Terrence decided to conduct focus groups with staff from different stores. Over the next week, he visited 5 locations, sitting down with small groups of employees to hear their stories. At one store, a young cashier named Mia shared her frustration. Sometimes it feels like no one's paying attention to what happens out here. I've told my manager about issues with certain employees, but nothing changes. In another location, a seasoned stock associate named James had a different perspective. My manager's great. She makes sure we're all on the same page and steps in when there's a problem. It makes a big difference. The stories varied, but the underlying message was clear. Employees wanted to feel seen, heard, and supported. They wanted to work in an environment where respect and professionalism weren't just expected but celebrated. 5. Designing the path forward. By the end of the week, Terrence and Olivia had developed the framework for Project Reset. Core values redefined. The company's values were distilled into 3 actionable principles. Respect every customer. Treat every individual with dignity and kindness, regardless of who they are. Own your impact. Recognize that every action, no matter how small, shapes the customer experience. Grow together. Commit to personal and professional growth while supporting your team. Mandatory training. Every employee, from entry-level associates to executives, would participate in interactive workshops focused on bias awareness, effective communication, and conflict resolution. Leadership accountability. Regional and store managers would undergo intensive leadership training, with clear expectations for fostering a positive culture. Recognition and rewards. Employees who exemplify the company's values would be publicly acknowledged and rewarded, creating a culture of appreciation. Anonymous feedback system. A new platform would allow employees to report concerns or suggest improvements without fear of retaliation. Regular audits. Teams of mystery shoppers and internal auditors would evaluate stores on service quality and adherence to company values. 6. The announcement. Terrence decided to address the entire company in a live-streamed town hall. Standing in front of a camera, his voice steady and filled with conviction, he spoke directly to his employees. "We're at a crossroads," he began. "What I've seen and heard over the past few weeks has been both heartbreaking and inspiring. Heartbreaking because we've fallen short of the values we were built on. Inspiring because I know we can do better, and I know you want to do better." He laid out the details of Project Reset, emphasizing that it wasn't about punishment but about growth. "This is our chance to rebuild, to reconnect with what makes this company special. But it starts with each of us taking responsibility. It starts with me. As the live stream ended, Terrence felt a sense of hope. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready to lead by example. This wasn't just about saving his company. It was about creating something truly transformative, a business that stood for dignity, respect, and excellence in every interaction. Transforming the culture from the inside out. Terrence Wallace stood at the head of the conference table in the company's corporate headquarters. The room was filled with regional managers, district leaders, and department heads, men and women who held the keys to the daily operations of his sprawling retail empire. The weight of the moment was palpable. This was the first of many steps in a journey to reclaim the soul of his company. Terrence began without preamble, his voice steady but firm. "We've lost our way." The room went silent. No one had expected such a stark opening. He let the words settle before continuing. "I've spent the last few weeks visiting stores, talking to employees, and listening to customers. What I've discovered is both troubling and clear. The culture we built together has eroded. We've allowed bias, indifference, and a lack of accountability to creep in. And it's my responsibility to fix it. But I can't do it alone." Terrence scanned the room, locking eyes with each person. The values this company was founded on, respect, integrity, and excellence, aren't optional. They are non-negotiable. And starting today, we're going to make sure they aren't just words on a wall, but actions we live by every day. 1. Rebuilding trust in leadership. Terrence turned his attention to the managers. Leadership is the cornerstone of culture. If you, as leaders, don't embody these values, how can we expect your teams to do the same? Change starts with you. He outlined the first phase of Project Reset, a leadership summit designed to equip managers with the tools to lead by example. The summit would focus on bias awareness, workshops on recognizing and addressing unconscious biases that impact interactions with employees and customers, empathetic leadership, training on active listening, conflict resolution, and fostering an inclusive environment, accountability systems, setting measurable goals for store culture and tying them to performance reviews and incentives. One of the regional managers, a woman named Linda, raised her hand. "Terrence, I've always tried to lead by example, but sometimes it feels like the corporate policies don't give us enough flexibility to address issues on the ground. How do we balance consistency with the unique challenges of each store?" Terrence nodded. "That's a fair point, Linda. One of the things we're implementing is a feedback loop between corporate and the field. You'll have more autonomy to address local challenges, but you'll also be expected to report back on how those decisions align with our core values. It's a partnership." Another manager, Greg, spoke up. "What about the employees who just don't care? We've all dealt with people who aren't invested, no matter what we do." Terrence's expression hardened slightly. "Then it's our job to figure out why. Is it a lack of training, poor communication, or have they simply lost sight of why they're here? If someone truly doesn't want to be part of this journey, we'll part ways. But we owe it to every employee to give them the tools and support they need to succeed before making that call." 2. The rollout of mandatory training. While the Leadership Summit was being planned, Terrence and his team began implementing company-wide training. Every employee, from entry-level associates to senior executives, was required to attend sessions on understanding bias, interactive exercises that revealed how unconscious assumptions can impact behavior, customer-centric communication, techniques for engaging with customers in a way that builds trust and loyalty, the power of respect, role-playing scenarios to reinforce the importance of treating every individual with dignity, regardless of their background. To make the training engaging and impactful, Terrence partnered with professional facilitators and included testimonials from real customers and employees. These stories, both positive and negative, brought the lessons to life, driving home the real-world consequences of every interaction. One testimonial featured Denise, the cashier who had impressed Terrence during his undercover visit. "When a customer leaves my register with a smile, I know I've done my job," she said in the video. It's not just about scanning items. It's about making people feel seen and valued. Another testimonial came from a customer who had experienced discrimination at one of the stores. "I almost didn't come back," she admitted. "But when I did, a different employee treated me with kindness and respect. That one interaction changed how I felt about the entire company." These stories resonated deeply with employees, sparking conversations and self-reflection. Many began to see how their daily actions, however small, contributed to the larger culture of the company. 3. A system for recognizing excellence. As part of Project Reset, Terrence introduced a new recognition program called Living Our Values. The program encouraged managers and employees to nominate colleagues who exemplified the company's core principles. Each month, winners would be highlighted in internal communications and rewarded with bonuses, extra time off, or other perks. The first recipients included Denise, whose dedication had inspired the program, and James, the seasoned stock associate who had shared his positive experiences with Terrence during the focus groups. Their stories were shared company-wide, serving as powerful examples of what the organization aspired to be. Terrence also made a point of visiting stores personally to present these awards, reinforcing the importance of these values at every level. During one visit, an employee asked him, "Why are you spending so much time on this? Don't CEOs have bigger things to worry about?" Terrence smiled. "This is the biggest thing. A business isn't just about profits, it's about people. If we don't get this right, nothing else matters." 4. Addressing the tough conversations. Not everyone embraced the changes immediately. Some employees felt the new initiatives were too demanding, while others resisted the idea of confronting their biases. One afternoon, Terrence received an anonymous email through the newly implemented feedback system. The message read, "I feel like this whole thing is just about making the company look good. What about the employees who've been here for years, doing their jobs without anyone questioning them? Now we're the problem." Terrence decided to address this concern directly. In his next company-wide communication, he acknowledged the discomfort many were feeling. "Change is hard," he admitted. "It's natural to feel defensive when asked to examine our actions and attitudes. But this isn't about blame. It's about growth. None of us are perfect, myself included. This process is about becoming better together. If you've been doing your job with integrity and respect, this isn't an attack on you. It's a celebration of what you've already been doing. And if there are areas where we can improve, let's embrace the opportunity to learn." 5. Measuring progress. 3 months into Project Reset, the first signs of improvement began to emerge. Customer satisfaction scores increased in multiple locations, particularly in stores that had previously struggled. Employees who had once seemed disengaged were now participating actively in team meetings and offering suggestions for improvement. Terrence also saw a shift in employee feedback. Comments like, "No one listens to us," were replaced with, "I feel like my voice matters now." The anonymous feedback system was flooded with ideas, many of which were implemented at the store level. But not everything was perfect. A few employees continued to resist the changes, and some locations struggled more than others. Terrence knew that true transformation would take time and persistence. 6. A personal reflection. Late one night, Terrence sat alone in his office, reviewing the latest reports. The progress was encouraging, but he couldn't shake the memory of that first undercover visit. The dismissive attitude of the electronics associate and the bias he had overheard still lingered in his mind. He opened his notebook and wrote a simple question: "What kind of legacy do I want to leave?" The answer was clear. He wanted his company to stand as a beacon of what was possible when respect, integrity, and accountability were woven into the fabric of an organization. He wanted every employee and customer to feel valued, no matter where they came from or who they were. As he closed the notebook, Terrence felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time in months, He felt like they were heading in the right direction, and he knew he wouldn't stop until they got there. Confronting resistance and solidifying change. 3 months into the ambitious rollout of Project Reset, Terrence Wallace felt both pride and pressure. The early signs of progress, improved customer satisfaction, better employee engagement, and more consistent service across stores, were encouraging. But as with any large-scale transformation, not everyone was on board. Resistance came from all levels of the company. Some managers viewed the new initiatives as a burden, taking time away from their primary tasks. A small but vocal group of employees dismissed the changes as corporate fluff, insisting that their performance should be judged solely on sales, not on soft skills or customer relationships. Terrence knew that addressing this resistance was critical. It wasn't enough to introduce new policies or training programs. He needed buy-in from everyone. The success of Project Reset depended on creating a culture where every individual believed in the mission and understood their role in achieving it. 1. The whisper of doubt. The first cracks in the project's momentum appeared during a meeting with the district managers. As Terrence sat at the head of the conference table, reviewing progress reports, he noticed a pattern. While some managers reported positive changes, others seemed hesitant, their language peppered with qualifiers like, "It's getting there," and "Some employees are still adjusting." One manager, Daniel, finally spoke up. "Terrence, I want to be honest. The training sessions are great, and I see the value, but we're losing ground in other areas. Some of my stores are struggling to hit their sales targets because employees are spending more time on customer interactions than closing deals. It's causing frustration." Terrence leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Daniel, I appreciate your honesty. But let me ask you this. Are those customer interactions building trust and loyalty?" Daniel hesitated. "In some cases, yes. But I still think there's a balance we're missing." "Balance is important," Terrence agreed. "But let's be clear, this company isn't just about transactions. It's about relationships. If we focus solely on hitting sales numbers at the expense of the customer experience, we'll lose the very foundation of what makes us successful. That's a risk I'm not willing to take." 2. An unannounced store visit. To get a closer look at the resistance, Terrence decided to visit one of the stores under Daniel's management, a mid-performing location in Houston. Unlike his first Undercover visit, this time he arrived as himself, announcing his presence to the store manager, a young woman named Carla. Carla greeted him warmly but with visible apprehension. "It's great to have you here, Mr. Wallace," she said. "We've been working hard to implement the training, but I know we still have a long way to go." Terrence smiled. "That's why I'm here, to see the progress and the challenges firsthand." As he walked the floor, he observed a mix of behaviors. Some employees were fully engaged, assisting customers with enthusiasm and professionalism. Others, however, seemed disengaged, offering curt responses or avoiding customer interactions altogether. At the electronics section, a sore spot from his first Undercover visit, Terrence noticed a young associate scrolling on his phone behind the counter. Terrence approached him, his demeanor calm but firm. "Hi there," he said. "I was wondering if you could help me find some Bluetooth speakers." The associate glanced up, his expression annoyed. "They're over there," he said, nodding vaguely toward a shelf without bothering to stand. Terrence didn't reveal his identity. Instead, he observed the associate for a moment, then asked, "Do you like working here?" The question seemed to catch the young man off guard. He shrugged. "It's okay, I guess. Just a job." Terrence nodded thoughtfully. "Just a job, huh? What would make it better?" The associate hesitated, then mumbled, "I don't know. Maybe if people didn't expect so much." Terrence thanked him and walked away, his mind racing. This interaction wasn't just about poor service. It was a symptom of a deeper issue, a lack of connection between the employees and the company's mission. 3. Turning resistance into opportunity. Later that day, Terrence sat down with Carla in her office. "You've got a mix of attitudes here," he said. "Some of your team is thriving, but others seem checked out. What's your take?" Carla sighed. "I think some of them feel like the new expectations are too much. They're used to just doing their tasks, and now we're asking them to care about things like customer relationships and teamwork. For some of them, it's a shift they're not ready for." Terrence leaned back, considering her words. "Change is always hard," he said. "But if we're going to succeed, we need to help them see the bigger picture. This isn't just about doing more. It's about doing better." He proposed a plan. Carla would hold one-on-one meetings with her team, not to reprimand but to listen. She would ask open-ended questions to understand their frustrations, fears, and motivations. Meanwhile, Terrence would arrange for additional support, including mentorship opportunities for employees who showed potential but struggled with the transition. 4. Engaging the skeptics. Back at headquarters, Terrence and his team developed a new initiative, Voices of the Frontline. The program invited employees from all levels to participate in focus groups where they could share their perspectives directly with leadership. At one of these sessions, Terrence sat across from a group of employees who had expressed skepticism about Project Reset. "Be honest with me," he said, his tone open and inviting. "What's not working for you?" One employee, a veteran stock associate named Marcus, didn't hold back. "It feels like we're being asked to change everything we've been doing for years. I've been here since the beginning, and now it's like none of that matters." "It does matter," Terrence said, his voice earnest. "The work you've done has laid the foundation for this company. But let me ask you this. Do you ever feel like your efforts go unnoticed?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Sometimes, yeah. That's what we're trying to fix," Terrence explained. "We're not asking you to change for the sake of change. We're asking you to grow because this company is growing, and we want to make sure you're part of that growth." By the end of the session, Marcus and several others had softened their stance. It wasn't a complete turnaround, but it was a start. 5. Celebrating milestones. To keep momentum, Terrence made a point of celebrating every win, no matter how small. When customer satisfaction scores improved at Carla's store, he sent her team a handwritten note, thanking them for their efforts. When Marcus showed signs of embracing the new culture, his manager nominated him for the Living Our Values program. At a company-wide town hall, Terrence highlighted these successes. "Progress isn't about perfection," he told his employees. "It's about effort. Every step we take in the right direction brings us closer to the company we want to be." 6. A personal revelation. One evening, as Terrence reviewed the latest reports, he came across a message from an employee who had completed the bias awareness training. The message read, "I didn't realize how many assumptions I was making about customers and even my coworkers. This training opened my eyes. I've started approaching people differently, and it's made my job more rewarding." Terrence felt a lump in his throat. This was the reason he had started Project Reset, to create a company where everyone felt seen, valued, and respected. He closed his laptop and stared out at the city skyline. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, he felt confident that they were on the right path. The resistance he had faced wasn't a roadblock. It was an opportunity to dig deeper, to connect with his people, and to build something stronger. And as he prepared for the next phase of the project, Terrence knew one thing for certain. True change didn't come from mandates or policies. It came from people, from their willingness to grow, to adapt, and to believe in something greater than themselves. Building a legacy of integrity, Terrence Wallace stood on a stage in front of an audience of over 300 people, composed of employees from every level of his company. It was the culmination of 6 months of relentless effort, a journey to repair, rebuild, and redefine the culture of his retail empire. The event, dubbed the Project Reset Summit, was more than a celebration. It was a declaration of purpose, a moment to solidify the transformation that had begun with his undercover visit to the Dallas store. 6 months ago, Terrence began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I walked into one of my stores, not as your CEO, but as a regular customer. What I experienced was a wake-up call, an eye-opening reminder that we had drifted away from the values this company was built on. He paused, letting his words settle over the room. But today, I'm standing here because of the progress we've made together. This isn't the end of the journey. It's just the beginning. Together, we've proven that change is possible, that we can rebuild trust, and that we can create something extraordinary. 1. A look back at the journey. Terrence took the audience through the milestones of Project Reset, highlighting key achievements. Improved customer satisfaction. Customer feedback had become overwhelmingly positive, with many praising the warmth, professionalism, and attentiveness of employees. Some even remarked that they had become loyal customers because of the improved experience. Employee engagement. Internal surveys showed a significant increase in employee satisfaction. Comments like, "I finally feel like my voice matters," had replaced the earlier complaints of feeling undervalued or ignored. Leadership accountability. Store managers had embraced their roles as culture champions, leading by example and addressing issues proactively. Several had initiated their own programs to keep employees motivated and aligned with the company's values. Terrence didn't shy away from acknowledging the challenges. There were moments when it felt like we were asking too much, when resistance made progress feel slow. But every time we faced a setback, we used it as an opportunity to learn, to adapt, and to push forward. 2. The human stories behind the transformation. The summit featured testimonials from employees and customers who had been directly impacted by the changes. One of the most moving stories came from Marcus, the veteran stock associate, who had initially resisted the new initiatives. "I'll be honest," Marcus said as he stood on stage, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "When this all started, I thought it was just corporate trying to make us jump through hoops. But then I started noticing something. Customers were happier. My coworkers were working better together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like what I did here actually mattered." The audience erupted in applause as Marcus concluded, "I'm proud to be part of this company, and I'm grateful for the chance to grow." Another story came from Carla, the manager of the Houston store Terrence had visited. "When Mr. Wallace came to my store, I was nervous. I thought he was going to point out everything we were doing wrong. Instead, he listened. He gave us the tools we needed, and he believed in us. That belief changed everything." Customers also shared their experiences. 1. A single mother named Rosa described how a store associate had gone above and beyond to help her find affordable school supplies for her children. "That day, I didn't just feel like a customer. I felt like someone who mattered." 3. Cementing the new culture. Terrence announced the next phase of Project Reset, focusing on sustainability and long-term impact. Continuous training. Employees would receive ongoing training to reinforce core values and adapt to new challenges. Feedback loops. Regular focus groups and surveys would ensure that employees and customers remained central to decision-making. Pathways to growth. Career development programs would be expanded, offering employees clear opportunities for advancement and recognition. Community engagement. Stores would be encouraged to partner with local organizations, fostering a sense of connection and shared purpose beyond the walls of the business. "We're not just running a business," Terrence emphasized. "We're building a community, a place where people feel valued, respected, and supported. That's the legacy I want us to leave." 4. Recognizing the heroes. The summit also included an award ceremony to honor employees who had gone above and beyond to embody the company's values. Denise, the cashier from Terrence's initial visit, was the first to receive recognition. "When I met Denise," Terrence said, his voice full of admiration, "she reminded me of why I started this company. Her kindness and professionalism are what we should all strive for." Denise accepted the award with tears in her eyes. "I just do my job the best I can," she said, "but it means so much to know that it's appreciated." Other awardees included a team from the clothing department who had developed a mentorship program for new hires and a manager who had implemented creative ways to keep employees motivated during busy seasons. 5. A personal reflection. That evening, after the summit had ended, Terrence found himself alone in his office, reflecting on the journey. The framed photo on his desk, a picture of his first store opening, caught his eye. He picked it up, remembering the excitement and determination he'd felt that day. Back then, the mission had been clear: to create a business that treated every customer with respect and every employee with dignity. Somewhere along the way, as the company grew, that mission had been overshadowed by the demands of expansion and efficiency. But now, it felt like he had rediscovered the heart of his business. Terrence opened his notebook, the same one he had carried since the beginning of this journey. On a blank page, he wrote, "What's next?" Beneath the question, he jotted down his thoughts. Keep listening. Keep learning. Never stop investing in people. As he closed the notebook, Terrence felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but he was ready. This wasn't just about building a successful company. It was about creating a legacy of integrity, one interaction, one employee, and one customer at a time. 6. The new beginning. The next morning, Terrence sent a message to all employees. Subject: Our journey together. Team. Yesterday's summit was a celebration of everything we've achieved, but it was also a reminder of the work still ahead. Each of you plays a vital role in shaping our future, and I want you to know how deeply I appreciate your dedication. This company is more than a business. It's a reflection of the values we stand for. Together, we've shown that change is possible. And together, we'll continue to grow. Thank you for believing in this mission and for making it a reality every day. Let's keep building something extraordinary. With gratitude, Terrence Wallace. As he hit send, Terrence smiled. The transformation wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about creating a culture that could weather any storm. For the first time in a long while, he felt confident that his company wasn't just a place to work or shop. It was a place where people thrived. And that was a legacy worth fighting for.